Gentlemen, thank you very much for coming this afternoon. I'd like to take this opportunity to ask you to please silence your cell phones so we can get through the afternoon without any interruptions. These three gentlemen will present this afternoon, and then we will have an opportunity to answer anyone who has some questions. So I'd like to introduce the Director of the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, Jim Zehringer. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jim Zehringer, the Director of the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, and I'd like to thank everyone for attending and tuning in today. We are here today to release and discuss the Ohio oil and gas production numbers for 2012. Obviously, all of you are interested in the production figures from the Utica, Point Pleasant formations. We think you'll be even more interested after this announcement, because we believe Ohio is now at the beginning of a historic era of oil and gas production. For the sake of brevity, during this presentation, I'll refer to the Utica Point Pleasant formation simply as the Utica. We will also place these 2012 oil and gas production figures in context. ODNR's Division of Oil and Gas Chief Rick Simmers will share appropriate qualifiers to assist your understanding and interpretation of the data. And David Mustine, Managing Director of Energy, Chemicals, and Polymers at Jobs Ohio, will talk about shale development and how it's affecting Ohio's economy. Now let me start with some context of my own. 2 years ago, we were waiting for today. 2 years ago, then ODNR Director David Mustine spoke about the potential economic growth of the Utica shale play contained for all of Ohio. Today, I can say with confidence that he and we were right. We now have Utica wells that are producing on their projected promise, and we have real numbers that tell their story. Today I'd like to share what these numbers mean for how we regulate the industry to safeguard Ohioans, and what the numbers mean historically and for the future of oil and gas production in Ohio. When I started at ODNR, Governor John Kasich told me his philosophy about oil and gas. He said the oil and gas industry could be prosperous in Ohio, but not at the expense of the environment. I want to make it clear that ODNR, as the chief regulator of the industry, our goal is to protect the health and public safety of Ohioans and the environment. Our regulations are based on science, not emotion or politics. We have some of the most comprehensive and tough regulations in the country. And the majority of companies coming in to develop in the Utica have not only complied with, but has exceeded a lot of these standards. These companies have showed their desire to be good stewards of the environment and business partners to our state. By the way, I'm also strongly in favor of keeping these regulations at the state level. Only if, because unlike federal regulators, our field staff and inspectors live in the communities that they are working to protect. We are much closer to the public than the federal government is. In advance of anticipated shale development, ODNR worked with the Ohio General Assembly to pass two major revisions to the oil and gas law over the past 3 years. Senate Bill 165 thoroughly overhauled Ohio's oil and gas regulations and created a firm foundation for proper oversight of the oil and gas industry in Ohio. Next, Senate Bill 315, which took effect last fall, specifically strengthened the law that related to horizontal shale development. As a result, Ohio has one of the strongest chemical disclosure regulations of any state in the nation, along with many new public health and environmental protections. Ohio has had a huge advantage in regulating shale development because our shale play wasn't the first to be developed. We had the opportunity to learn from what other states already regulating the shale drilling. I personally contacted leaders in states such as Texas, Colorado, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Arkansas, and North Dakota to discuss lessons learned with them. Here's what we learned. All state leaders emphasize the importance of clarity and transparency. One piece of advice they gave us was to make sure your regulations were in place so the industry knew what was expected of them. This is what we've done with Senate Bill 315 and our well construction rules. We wanted our regulations to be clear and complete. This enables us to fairly and effectively monitor this growing industry. Something else we learned from other states was to make sure your regulatory staff was in place and fully trained. Right now, we employ more than 50 field staff, and we can add more employees if the need increases. We pay close attention to the number of wells permitted, drilled, and in production to ensure we have the right number of properly trained field staff to regulate this growth. It is imperative to have the right people on the ground with the right regulations in place, and we're gearing up for growth. We have received praise from top experts for our regulatory approach. Daniel Jurgen, the renowned energy scholar and expert, said, and I quote, "Ohio is implementing lessons and best practices from around the country and is creating a rigorous and responsive regulatory system for the new era of oil and gas development in the state," end quote. Finally, part of our task as a regulatory authority means we must respond quickly when blatant disregard for the law occurs. We cannot prevent all illegal activity. We can and do respond to it properly and swiftly. Now for some historical context for the oil and gas production. Ohio has had a long history of oil and gas activity. The first commercial well was drilled in 1860 in southeast Ohio in Washington County. Ohio's oil boom came in 1884 when drillers moved to the northwestern corner of the state in the giant Lima oil field. For several years, Ohio was the world's largest oil producer. Natural gas development took off in Fairfield County and the surrounding counties around the turn of the century. In 1961, another oil reserve was discovered in Morrill County, prompting the next oil boom. In more than 150 years of production, Ohio has drilled more than 270,000 wells, produced more than 1 billion barrels of oil, and more than 8.5 trillion cubic feet of gas. Now let's talk about the current production numbers, which